I'm Margie Rasmussen, a mindfulness practitioner and an abstract artist. And if you've found my video today because you've recently lost someone and you were searching and I popped up, I just want to first say I'm terribly, terribly sorry for your loss. This video is actually intended for people who are going to be supporting you during this time. This video is intended for those people who are currently supporting someone who is going through the grieving process. I wanted to talk about the fact that quite often when someone close to us loses someone, that there's a tendency, almost an urge or a desire to help them, to contribute to their life in some way, to help them feel better, to help them get through the experience. For example, sometimes we take people out to lunch, sometimes we just pop in on them and check on them, sometimes we bring them flowers or gifts or food. Food is a big one. When it comes to allowing the person who's grieving to actually be in their grief for however long that it takes, sometimes the people supporting that individual, the one grieving, can struggle with this. It can feel very uncomfortable to sort of allow the grieving process. And I wanted to talk about why that is. And in most cases, the reason that that's difficult is because there is a difficulty in having space, presence, or just allowing your own emotional experience, your own internal emotional experience to happen. So when I think about what someone who's grieving needs from a person who will be supporting them, I think of it in terms of taking yourself through a process, a 3-step process at the bare minimum. And this is just speaking at the emotional level. This is not in regard to the physical level of bringing them food, doing something physically for them, taking care of bills, that type of thing. This is a 3-step process that is just relevant mainly to the emotional experience. So the first step in this 3-step process is that you need to become aware of you, the person supporting the grieving person. You need to become aware of your own internal emotional response to their grief process. You're going to feel some kind of way about how they're expressing their grief, how they're going through their grief, just the fact that they're even grieving at all. And it's very important to become aware of what your experience is in response to their grief. Secondly, most likely you're going to feel discomfort and of course sadness and amongst other things. But I really want to hone in on and specifically talk about that discomfort, that feeling where you just kind of want to make it go away and you want to fix something, you want to just get the right components together. Like if they just had the right schedule, the right whatever, then things are going to get better. Notice that. Notice when you're feeling that, because that is something that does not require action. It requires presence. It requires you to stop and listen to what you're feeling and validate it and say, whatever experience I'm having right now in response to what the grieving person is going through is valid as well. And it is absolutely okay to be feeling that way. You don't have to make it mean that you don't care about them or anything else. You just need to acknowledge what you're feeling in response to their grief process. Because in step 3, what you're going to do is emotionally caretake to your own needs so that you don't inadvertently make their grief be something that they now have to do, that they have to change so that you are comfortable enough to be around them to support them, right? Because when we've taken that turn, there is no more support happening for the person who's grieving. When we are trying to fix something or make them feel better or taking any type of action where there has been no validation, or just even sitting in the uncomfortable silences or the screaming or whatever it is, whenever we're trying to alter how someone is experiencing something, that is absolutely an invalidating experience to them. Whether they're aware of it or not, it's felt. It can be felt, like in your body and in your emotions. The most common thing that I see people who are grieving talk about is the intolerance of their grieving at any level or stage of their grief. It can be early on, it can be midway through, it can be late. The most common thing that is the most upsetting to someone who is grieving is not being allowed to grieve and to do that for as long as it takes. So with step 3, when you are caretaking to your own emotions, but caretaking, I mean setting your boundaries, deciding what's healthy for you, how long can you actually be fully present with the grieving person, how frequently can you be there and be present for them and not have it be impacting you in such a way that you now need them to feel better because this is too much stress on you. You have to be really honest with yourself and just do what you can do, and hopefully enough people will come together and do what they can do so that across the board the person is supported. But when you utilize these 3 steps, the first being recognizing, becoming aware of your own internal emotional reaction to their grief. Secondly, acknowledging that and allowing that and validating what you're feeling in response. And thirdly, recognizing that that is for you to caretake to, not the person who's grieving. Doing this, you're going to ease tension within yourself. You're becoming more mindfully present with your emotions. Most likely you're going to tune into your body as well. So you're going to feel where you have tension and note that, when you become more mindful in this way, emotionally and physically, you carve out more space to relax into your own self so that you can be present with the person who's grieving. So even though it can feel really counterintuitive to do nothing with the grieving person, like it makes so much sense, and we have all been there where you get that, what can I do? What can I do? I need to do something, right? Get that feeling when someone passes, because there's literally not nothing, but like you really, in terms of how that person feels in regard to the person they lost, how the grieving person feels, you can't do the thing that they need the most, right? So there's really not anything you can do in terms of that. Of course, there are other things you can do. You can be there with them, you can be present with them, you can take care of anything that they need help with, etc. But emotionally, where they need the presence the most, where they need your attention and focus the most, is on their felt experience, right? The clothes don't matter, the car doesn't matter, the house doesn't matter. How they're feeling and what they're going through is what matters the most. So clearing your own emotional decks so that you can be there for them is super important. And you may need to repeat this 3-step process multiple times, even multiple times within one visit, because a trigger may come up and they may change from the way they were previously expressing their grief. Trigger pops up, now they're expressing their grief this other way, and it's a shock to your system. So in order for you to absorb that shock, you've got to be aware of what that response in you is. You've got to allow it and validate it. And then on top of that, you've got to make a mental note how you're going to take care of yourself in regard to it, so that you don't inadvertently just push all of that back on that person. They need to be able to go through feeling what they're feeling and getting triggered by this and that and the other thing. That is how people heal after there's been a death. They need to be able to spike and fall low Of course, we want to make sure that everyone is safe. If there's ever any question about someone's safety or their life or their bodily safety or the safety of others that they're caring for, absolutely you step in and you do something, right? But emotionally speaking, they need to be able to go through all the shifting changes that will carry on for quite some time in regard to their grief process. There's no time limit on grief. Grief takes absolutely as long as it takes. And every single person's grief journey is different. So the only thing that you can do if you truly want to support someone who is going through grief is to manage your emotions and caretake to yourself so that you have something to give them, because they need it all. They need it all, and they're going to need it for a while. You know, so often people's lives are forever changed and forever marked by the passing of a loved one. And frequently after there's the funeral, the memorial, whatever proverbial dust was kicked up and however their life was celebrated, or whatever steps were taken where a lot of people noticed and came in on the initial time period to help and be there and do things, that usually settles down in about 1 to 3 months after someone has passed. Yet this person who lost someone is moving forward through time and space, stuck right before where they were right before they lost that person. And it can be very hard to bridge that gap. So it is incredibly important that when not only that we stay in contact with someone after they've lost a loved one for a long time, but when we do reach out in the future, do not have expectations in your mind of where they're going to be at or where they should be at. Prepare yourself that they're going to feel exactly the same as when you encountered them in those beginning times, because most likely they're still feeling all of that. So another one of the most painful things that people have told me they experience through the grieving process is down the line, or just, you know, wherever in the space of time after the loss, someone asks them how they're doing, and that person is super hopeful and they're pepped up and maybe they're in a good mood, and then the grieving person answers honestly how they're doing, and it's met with just absolute intolerance, right? So that person wasn't expecting to hear that they're not doing well, and now they don't know what to do because they don't know how to caretake their own emotions, and they're not okay with someone else who's not feeling the best. Please try to avoid that. I would highly suggest trying as much as possible to avoid holding any expectations as far as how someone should feel for any length of time after a passing of their loved one. And when you ask how they're doing, please be ready to give your presence and to validate however they're feeling, even if you would think in your mind you would not feel that same way. That does not matter. That is not valid. What is valid is how that person who experienced the loss is feeling, no matter where you are forward in time from the passing. So again, the 3 steps that I would take and I would use personally to become more mindfully present of my own emotional experience would be to recognize how I'm feeling in response to a person's grieving process. Notice the discomfort, pay attention to the discomfort, allow myself to feel uncomfortable, and validate that, yeah, it's really uncomfortable. Just like the grieving person is going to be feeling how they're feeling, and that's absolutely a warranted response to what's going on, so is feeling uncomfortable and like you don't know what to do or you need to do something in order to help when someone has passed, right? So acknowledging that, validating that, and then checking yourself and recognizing what you need, caretaking to those emotions that are coming up, either through setting better boundaries or just really being aware of when you're going to suggest something or do something. Is that coming from a place of, I'm uncomfortable and if I do this, I'm going to feel better? Or is this coming from a place of, I really care about what they're feeling right now and I want to be present with them and I want to be for them what they need in this moment for as long as I am capable to do that? I would definitely ask those questions of myself and go through that process as often as necessary. So I was prompted to record this video because someone very, very close to me lost someone very recently. And so also one of those ways that we can caretake to ourselves is we can express ourselves in a creative way. And this was the painting that I created in response to the person who passed. And that is also a way you can take care of yourself, is to get it out of you. Put it somewhere else and turn it into something beautiful. And then you're not trying to make somebody else feel differently because you feel uncomfortable with what's going on, because it is uncomfortable. Death is uncomfortable. It's a terrible, awful process. And if you can take really good care of yourself, then you'll be able to really be able to support someone who is struggling with their grieving process. Struggling just in general because it's painful and just going through their grief process. If you would like assistance in learning how to better manage your emotions and become more mindfully present so that you can support someone who is grieving, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email. I'll link it in the description and I'll also have it on the screen. And if you are someone that's grieving loss and you are ready and you would like support, please feel free to reach out to me as well. Be well.